Liam had always lived a quiet life. Born and raised on Earth, he never imagined his world would ever be anything but ordinary. His days consisted of work, the occasional night out with friends, and long hours spent on his computer. But that all changed on one rainy afternoon, when the sky above the city crackled with a strange, unnatural light. It happened so fast, no one had time to react. At first, people thought it was a storm, an electric storm like no other they had seen before. But then the ships appeared. Giant, gleaming vessels, far larger than anything mankind had ever built. They hovered in the sky like silent giants, casting shadows over the city. No one knew where they came from or how they arrived, but everyone knew they weren't from Earth. Panic spread quickly. People screamed in fear, running in every direction, trying to escape the unknown. Sirens blared, and military jets scrambled into the air, but the alien ships remained unmoving, unbothered by the human chaos below. Liam had been sitting at his computer when the first flash of light illuminated his room. He jumped up, heart racing, and rushed to the window. His eyes widened as he saw the enormous ships hovering above the city, their sleek silver surfaces shimmering in the fading light of the storm. What in the world? He grabbed his jacket and rushed outside, drawn by a strange, unexplainable pull. He couldn't explain why, but something deep inside him told him he needed to go. He wasn't alone. All around him, people stood frozen in awe and fear, their eyes glued to the sky. Then, as if in response to the global panic, one of the ships lowered, gently hovering above the ground in the center of the city. Its sleek, metallic surface gleamed under the moonlight, and the air around it seemed to shimmer. Liam could feel a sudden chill, an unnatural coldness sweeping through the air. Something was happening, but he had no idea what. Before he could process what was going on, a figure appeared in the center of the ship. At first, he thought it was a hologram or some kind of projection, but as it came closer, Liam could see it was real. A woman, tall, regal, and with a presence that immediately commanded attention. Her hair shimmered like strands of silver light, and her eyes were the deepest shade of violet he had ever seen, glowing faintly in the darkness. The crowd fell silent, watching her every move. She was unlike anyone they had ever seen. Alien, yes, but there was something captivating about her, something undeniably powerful. "I am Princess Ilara of the Zorathian Empire," she said, her voice rich and melodic, yet clear and firm. Her words echoed through the air, amplified by some unknown technology. "We have come to offer you a gift." The crowd gasped in disbelief. A gift? What did she mean? Liam found himself stepping forward, almost without thinking. The princess's gaze locked onto him, her violet eyes scanning him as if she had known him forever. He felt an unfamiliar pull, a strange connection between them, like she was reading him from the inside out. "Human," she said, her voice soft but commanding. "You are the one I have chosen." The words hit him like a thunderclap. He stumbled back, shocked, trying to understand what she meant. Chosen for what? He wasn't anyone special. He was just a regular guy, living an ordinary life. Why would an alien princess choose him? Before he could speak, Ilara raised a hand, and suddenly, a soft light surrounded him. He felt an overwhelming rush of energy, like something deep inside him had been awakened. His heart pounded, and his breath quickened as if something was shifting within him, something powerful and strange. "You have a purpose," she said, stepping closer. "A purpose greater than you can imagine. I will take you with me, and you will learn what it means to be more than you ever thought possible." The world around Liam seemed to blur. He tried to focus on her words, but his mind was overwhelmed. Was this real, or was he dreaming? He looked around, hoping someone would explain what was happening, but the crowd was as stunned as he was. Ilara held out her hand, and before he could fully process the situation, she beckoned to him. "Come with me," she said softly. "You are needed." Liam hesitated. What was happening? Why him? Why now? He wanted to say no, to run, but something inside him resisted. A part of him, a deep, hidden part, wanted to follow her. It was like a calling, a pull that he couldn't ignore. His body moved before his mind could catch up. He took a step forward, then another. Before he knew it, he was standing directly in front of Ilara. Her hand was still outstretched, waiting. The moment he touched her hand, everything changed. A surge of energy rushed through his body, flooding him with power and clarity. His vision sharpened, and for a brief moment, he saw the world differently. He could see the intricate web of energy around him, the life force of every person, every building, even the very air itself. It was like the universe had opened up to him, revealing its secrets. Then, just as suddenly as it had come, the surge faded, leaving him breathless and disoriented. But the connection between him and Ilara remained. It was undeniable. "You will come with me now," Ilara said, her voice gentle yet commanding. "Your journey is just beginning, Liam, and the fate of worlds may depend on it." Liam blinked, trying to process what had just happened. He wasn't sure what was real anymore. But one thing was certain: his life, his future, had just been changed forever. The alien princess had chosen him. And now there was no turning back. Liam's heart raced as he stood at the threshold of the alien ship, Ilara's words echoing in his mind. The strange pull he felt toward her was unlike anything he had ever experienced, and as the ship's doors slowly closed behind him, he couldn't help but wonder if he was making a mistake. There was no turning back now. He was leaving Earth, the only home he had ever known, to follow a mysterious alien princess on a journey to a world he couldn't even imagine. The inside of the ship was unlike anything he had seen before. Sleek, metallic walls that hummed with an almost living energy. The air felt different too, charged with a strange, electric current that made his skin tingle. It was as if every part of the ship was alive, aware of his presence, watching him. As they moved deeper into the ship, Ilara led him through a series of corridors, their soft glow illuminating their path. She moved with the grace of someone who belonged here, her every step confident and purposeful. Liam, on the other hand, felt like a stranger in this alien world, his every step heavy with uncertainty. They finally arrived at a large chamber, a circular room filled with glowing symbols and intricate designs etched into the walls. In the center of the room stood a strange device, its surface flickering with light, casting an eerie glow across the space. Ilara turned to him, her violet eyes studying him closely. "This is where you will begin," she said softly. "What happens here will shape your future." Liam frowned, confused. "What do you mean?" "You have more inside you than you realize," Ilara continued. "This place will help unlock your true potential. You are not just a human anymore, Liam. You are something greater. The power inside you is just waiting to be unleashed." Liam was about to ask what kind of power she was talking about when he felt it. A sudden, overwhelming wave of energy coursing through his body. It was like every nerve in his body was on fire, every cell vibrating with raw power. He gasped, gripping the sides of the strange device to steady himself. His body trembled, but it wasn't from fear. It was from the sheer intensity of the force building within him. He could feel something changing inside him, something ancient awakening deep in his core. Ilara watched him intently, her expression unreadable. "The transformation has begun," she said quietly. Liam could barely hear her over the pounding of his own heart, the energy surging through him threatening to overwhelm him. He closed his eyes, trying to focus, but all he could feel was the raw power rushing through him. He didn't understand it, didn't know what was happening, but he knew one thing for sure: this was only the beginning. And whatever came next, he had no choice but to face it. When he opened his eyes again, Ilara was standing before him, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder. "It will take time," she said, "but you are no longer just a human. You are something more." Liam swallowed hard, trying to process what she was saying. Was he really changing? And if so, what did that mean for him? For Earth? For everything he had ever known? As if reading his thoughts, Ilara spoke again. You were chosen because of your potential, Liam. The power inside you was dormant, but now it's awakening. The transformation you're going through is necessary if you're going to survive what's coming. You have a role to play, and it's much bigger than anything you've ever imagined. Liam didn't know what to say. His mind was reeling, the enormity of what was happening too much to fully comprehend. He was just an ordinary man, a nobody from Earth. How could he possibly be part of something so much bigger than himself? But as he looked into Ilara's eyes, he realized she believed in him. Somehow, she knew that he was the one who could help her fulfill her mission. He didn't know how or why, but he knew he couldn't turn back. The transformation had begun, and there was no going back to the life he had known. He was in this now, whether he was ready or not. As the ship hummed around him, Liam couldn't help but wonder what lay ahead. What kind of power was awakening inside him? And what role did he have to play in this strange new world? Only time would tell. But one thing was certain: his life would never be the same again. Liam stood in the center of the chamber, still reeling from the surge of energy that had coursed through him. His heart raced, but now it was different. The pounding was steady, like the beat of a war drum. His body felt alive in a way he had never experienced before, and his senses were sharper, more attuned to the world around him. He looked down at his hands, half expecting them to be glowing or pulsing with the power he could feel within him. But they were normal, just his hands. Yet something was undeniably different. Ilara had stepped back, watching him carefully. She was calm, as if this was all a natural progression, but Liam couldn't shake the feeling that everything had changed in the blink of an eye. She'd said that the transformation was just beginning, but what did that mean? Was he truly becoming something else, or was he simply being used as a tool for some unknown purpose? He needed answers. "What is this, Ilara?" he asked, his voice shaky but determined. "What exactly is happening to me?" Her violet eyes locked onto his, filled with a depth that seemed to speak of untold knowledge. "You are awakening to your true self, Liam. The power inside you has always been there, hidden away. Your human form was just a shell, a disguise. You were born for something greater." Liam shook his head, trying to grasp the magnitude of her words. "I don't understand. I'm just a human. I don't have any hidden power." Ilara smiled faintly, her gaze softening just for a moment. "You have been blind to it, but now it is beginning to stir. Your mind is expanding, your body is adapting. Soon, you will see the universe in ways you can't even imagine." Before Liam could ask more, he felt it again. A wave of energy, not as overwhelming as before, but still undeniable. It started in his chest, a warmth that spread outwards, down his arms, and through his legs. The air around him seemed to hum, vibrating with the same strange power he felt inside himself. His body pulsed with energy, and for the first time since this all began, Liam felt like he wasn't alone. Like the universe was somehow, impossibly, a part of him. Ilara stepped forward, her expression serious once more. "This is the beginning of your training. You must learn to harness the power you've been given, or it will consume you." Liam took a deep breath, steadying himself. He didn't know what she meant by training, but he knew he had no choice but to follow her. There was no returning to his old life, no going back to the simple, quiet existence he had once known. Whatever path lay ahead, he had to walk it. He had been chosen for something, and he had to understand what that something was. Ilara moved to a nearby wall, pressing her hand against a hidden panel. The metal slid open, revealing a holographic map of sorts, glowing lines and symbols that shifted and morphed as if alive. She gestured for Liam to come closer. "This is the path ahead," she explained. "It is the map of our empire, the Zorathian kingdom. We are not the only ones who roam the stars, and there are forces that will stop at nothing to destroy us. That is why you are here. You must be prepared for what's coming." Liam stepped forward, his eyes scanning the glowing map. He could feel something drawing him to it, a deep connection, as though he were somehow connected to the very stars themselves. He couldn't explain it, but there it was. His mind seemed to understand the map more than it should have. The lines and symbols weren't just abstract. They felt real, as if he could reach out and touch them. Ilara's voice brought him back to the present. "The transformation you're undergoing is not just physical. Your mind is unlocking ancient knowledge, knowledge that has been passed down through generations of Zorethians. You have the potential to become a great warrior, Liam. The power inside you can protect our people, but it can also destroy them if misused." Liam nodded, absorbing her words, but the weight of them pressed down on him. He had been a simple man, just a worker, a dreamer, trying to make sense of a life that often felt too ordinary. Now, he was being thrust into a galaxy of unknowns, surrounded by ancient empires and untold powers. He didn't know if he was ready for this, but deep down, he understood there was no other choice. Ilara stepped back, her gaze never leaving him. "Your training begins now. It will be difficult. The power inside you is volatile. If you cannot control it, it will destroy you and everyone around you. But I will help you." Liam swallowed hard. "How do we begin?" Ilara's lips curled into a faint smile, but it was a smile that held both promise and danger. "We begin with your mind. We must unlock the full potential of your power. Once you understand your abilities, we can move on to combat. The real war is yet to come." Liam took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm of questions swirling in his mind. He didn't know what awaited him on this journey. He didn't know if he could truly become the warrior Ilara needed, but there was no turning back now. He had been chosen for a reason, and it was time to find out exactly what that reason was. As Ilara gestured for him to follow, Liam couldn't shake the feeling that his life had just become part of a much larger story, one that would shape not just his future, but the fate of entire civilizations. As they left the chamber, the weight of what lay ahead began to sink in. Liam was no longer just a human. He was something else. And this new life, this new destiny, was far bigger than anything he could have ever imagined. The days began to blur together as Liam's training continued aboard the alien ship. It was unlike anything he had ever experienced, and yet it felt strangely familiar. The power coursing through his body wasn't just a tool. It was a part of him, something buried deep within his soul. With every passing day, the connection grew stronger, and so did his understanding of what he was becoming. The ship, the alien world, and Ilara herself seemed to pulse with life, each moment offering new lessons and challenges. The first part of his training was mental. Ilara had told him that before he could wield his newfound strength, he needed to understand the depth of his abilities. They spent hours in the training room, a place that felt like a cross between a dojo and a meditation chamber. It was a quiet, serene space where every movement echoed with purpose. The walls of the room were lined with symbols that glowed softly, like the stars in the sky. Ilara taught him to focus his mind, to quiet the constant buzz of thoughts that clouded his awareness. She made him sit in silence, his legs crossed, his breathing slow and steady. The first few attempts were frustrating. Every time Liam tried to focus, his mind would wander, thoughts of Earth, of his old life, of everything he had left behind. He would find himself thinking of his friends, his family, and the life he had known. It was hard to push all of that aside. But Ilara was patient, guiding him with soft words and gentle encouragement. "You must learn to clear the distractions," she told him one day. "Only then will you be able to see clearly. Only then will you be able to use the power within you." It wasn't easy. For days, he struggled, but something began to shift within him. Slowly, he learned to control his breathing and silence his mind. It was like stepping into a deeper state of awareness, where time itself seemed to slow down. The more he practiced, the more he could sense the energy around him, Subtle vibrations in the air, the slight hum of the ship's core beneath the floor, even the movement of Ilara's energy as she stood in front of him. Finally, one day, as he sat meditating, a rush of power surged through him. Not physical strength, but something else, something mental. His mind opened up like a floodgate, and in an instant, he could feel the entire ship. He could sense its structure, the pulsating energy flowing through its walls, the warmth of the engine room far below, and even the distant stars outside. He was connected to it all, and the realization hit him like a wave. This power was not just in him. It was around him, everywhere. Liam opened his eyes, his breath quickening. "I felt it," he whispered, his voice shaky. "I felt the ship, the energy." Ilara nodded, her eyes sparkling with approval. "Good. You've taken the first step. Now you must learn to harness it. We will begin the physical training tomorrow." That night, as Liam lay in his quarters, he couldn't shake the feeling of connection to the ship, to Ilara, and to something greater. He had never felt so alive, so aware. But with that power came a sense of unease. What did it all mean? What role was he meant to play in all of this? His thoughts were interrupted as he heard a soft knocking at his door. He opened it to find Ilara standing there, her expression unreadable. "Come with me," she said quietly. Liam followed her down the corridor, his curiosity piqued. The ship was quieter at night, its glowing symbols casting strange shadows on the walls. They walked for what felt like an eternity before they reached a new room, much larger than the meditation chamber. This one was filled with weapons, long, gleaming swords, intricate blades that seemed to hum with an energy of their own. "This is where you will learn to fight," Ilara said, her voice echoing in the vast space. "You may have power, but without skill, you will be useless. We fight to survive. And we fight for something much greater than ourselves." Liam looked around, feeling a strange mix of awe and apprehension. He wasn't a fighter. He had never been in a real battle. Yet, standing in this room, surrounded by weapons that seemed to hum with energy, he realized that this was his reality now. There was no turning back. He had to adapt or die. Ilara handed him a sword, its hilt cold and smooth in his hand. The blade was sharp, almost too sharp, and Liam could feel the weight of it in his grip. It felt like an extension of himself, as though the weapon and he were one. "This is not just a sword," Ilara explained. "This weapon is infused with energy. It will respond to your will, to your mind. If you focus your power, it will obey. If you lose control, it could become a threat." Liam looked down at the sword, unsure of what to do with it. His fingers tightened around the hilt, and suddenly he felt a rush of warmth spread through his arm. The blade vibrated slightly in his grip, as though it were alive. He raised it, experimenting with the weight. To his surprise, it felt natural. Ilara watched him intently. "Good. Now, let's see what you can do." Without warning, she lunged toward him, her movements swift and precise. Liam barely had time to react. Instinctively, he raised the sword in defense, blocking her strike with a force that surprised them both. Ilara stepped back, her violet eyes narrowing with interest. "You have natural talent," she said, "but you need to learn to control your instincts, to fight with purpose." They spent the next few hours in combat, each exchange a lesson in skill and control. Liam struggled at first, unsure of his movements, but with every strike, his confidence grew. The power inside him, the power he had once feared, now flowed through him like a river, guiding his every move. He wasn't just learning how to fight. He was learning how to survive. By the time they stopped, Liam was exhausted but exhilarated. He had never felt so alive, so connected to something larger than himself. And although he knew there was still much to learn, he also knew one thing for certain. He was no longer just a man. He was a warrior. As Ilara led him back to his quarters, she spoke softly. "You are learning quickly, Liam. But the real test is still to come. What you face in the coming days will be unlike anything you've ever imagined. Be ready. Liam nodded, his mind swirling with questions, but one thing was clear. Whatever awaited him, he was ready to face it. He was no longer the man he had once been. He was something more, something stronger, and the journey was only just beginning. The next few days passed in a blur of training, lessons, and constant discovery. Liam's body and mind were being reshaped, molded into something entirely different. The power that flowed within him no longer felt like a foreign force. It felt like a part of him. His strength, his awareness, and his ability to connect with the ship, the weapons, and even Ilara had grown by leaps and bounds. Yet, as much as he had changed, something still gnawed at him. He had been told that his training was just the beginning. What did that really mean? What would happen when he had to face whatever was coming? The weight of it pressed down on him. On the 6th day, Ilara took him to a new chamber, a place he had never seen before. It was dimly lit, the air thick with an energy that made the hair on the back of his neck stand on end. In the center of the room was a large stone pedestal, and on it lay a strange artifact, an ornate crown made of what appeared to be a dark metallic substance, pulsating faintly with an eerie light. "This," Ilara said softly, "is the artifact of our ancestors. The Zorathian crown. It holds the key to everything, the true potential of your power, and the destiny you are meant to fulfill." Liam stepped forward, his breath catching in his throat. The crown seemed to call to him, its aura heavy and ancient. It was unlike anything he had ever seen, yet it felt strangely familiar. As he reached out, Ilara stopped him with a hand on his arm. "Not yet," she warned. "You are not ready for it. But soon, you will be." Liam looked at her, confusion still clouding his mind. "What do you mean, not ready? I've been training for days. I can feel the power inside me. Why am I not ready?" Ilara's gaze softened, but there was a certain intensity behind her eyes. "Because power alone is not enough. You must learn to wield it, to control it, and most importantly, to understand the consequences of your actions. The crown is more than just a symbol. It's a weapon. And if you are not careful, it can destroy you." Liam felt a shiver run down his spine. The idea of wielding such a powerful object terrified him. Yet the thought of what it could do, what it could unlock, also intrigued him. What could it mean for him? For the universe, for Ilara? "How do I prepare for it?" he asked, trying to steady his voice. "By continuing your training," she replied. "You need to learn not just how to fight, but how to fight with purpose. You must learn to understand the balance between power and responsibility." For the next several days, Liam's training became even more intense. He began to understand the true meaning of control, not just over his physical abilities, but over the energy that surged through him. Ilara pushed him harder, challenging him in ways he never thought possible. She forced him to face his deepest fears, his darkest doubts, and with each trial, he grew stronger, not just physically, but emotionally and mentally as well. They practiced combat, of course, but there was more to it than just fighting. Ilara taught him the art of strategy, how to read his enemy and anticipate their every move. She showed him how to use the environment to his advantage, how to fight with his mind as much as his body. But it wasn't just about killing. It was about understanding why they fought, what they were fighting for, and who they were fighting against. It was about understanding the stakes, the war that was coming, the forces that were already gathering in the shadows. As Liam trained, Ilara told him more about the Zorathian Empire, its history, its conflicts, and its enemies. They were not the only species in the galaxy who possessed such power, and many of those who sought it were ruthless in their pursuit. There were powerful alien factions, ruthless empires, and dangerous warlords, all vying for control of the universe. But the Zorathians had a secret, a power that had been passed down through generations, a power that had kept their empire alive for centuries. And now, it was Liam's to wield. The crown will allow you to tap into that power fully, Ilara explained one evening as they sat in the quiet of the ship's central hub. But you must first prove yourself worthy. Only those who have mastered their own power are capable of handling the crown. If you fail, it will consume you. Liam absorbed her words, but a part of him still felt uncertain. What if he wasn't ready? What if he wasn't the one Ilara had hoped he would be? He had only just begun to understand the vastness of this new world he had entered. The stakes were too high, and now there was something worse than his fear: doubt. The weight of it all was enough to crush anyone, but Liam couldn't afford to let that happen. He had no choice but to keep going. The real test came sooner than he expected. Late one night, as Liam was practicing alone in the training room, he felt it. A tremor in the ship's structure, a strange shift in the air. The lights flickered, and the walls seemed to hum in response. Something was happening. Ilara appeared in the doorway, her face set in a grim expression. Get ready. They're here. Liam's heart skipped a beat. Who? The enemy, she said, her voice low and dangerous. The ones who seek the power you're learning to wield. They're coming, and they'll stop at nothing to get what they want. Liam gripped his sword tighter, the weight of it no longer unfamiliar. He felt the power inside him surge once again, and this time, it didn't feel like an unknown force. This time, it felt like his own. He wasn't just a pawn in some game. He was part of this fight, this war. As Ilara led him down the hallways of the ship, Liam could feel the tension in the air. The ship was alive with movement, a sense of urgency that made his heart race. His training had prepared him for this moment, but nothing could have fully prepared him for the battle that was about to unfold. The stakes were higher than ever, and with every step, Liam knew that he was no longer just a human. He was something more, something greater. The warrior he was becoming would not just fight for his survival. He would fight for the future of an entire empire. The sound of footsteps echoed through the corridors of the ship, quickening as they grew closer. The tension in the air was thick, each moment stretching longer than the last. Liam's heart pounded in his chest as he followed Ilara down the ship's narrow hallways. His hands tightened around the hilt of his sword, the cold metal now an extension of his body. He had trained for this, but in the pit of his stomach, a part of him wasn't sure if he was ready. Ilara led him to a large chamber at the heart of the ship, a room that seemed to pulse with a strange, unnatural energy. It was a command center of sorts. Large screens displayed real-time data from the ship's sensors, and maps of the galaxy flashed in rapid succession. The crew of the ship moved around swiftly, coordinating, preparing. There was no time to waste. The enemy is closing in, Ilara said, her voice steady, but carrying a weight of urgency. They have a fleet, advanced, ruthless. They want the power of the Zorethians, and they believe the crown is the key. Liam's eyes scanned the room, trying to make sense of what was happening. His mind was still trying to process the fact that, only days ago, he had been an ordinary man, a human with no understanding of the universe, with no sense of the forces at play. Now he was being thrust into the heart of a war that could decide the fate of entire galaxies. Who are they? He asked, trying to steady his breath. Elits, Ilara replied, her gaze focused on the holographic map before her. An alliance of mercenaries, pirates, and rogue military factions. They have no loyalty to anyone but themselves. Their leader, Varric, is a conqueror. He has united these factions under his rule with one goal in mind, to take control of the galaxy. And now, they're coming for the crown. The words hit Liam like a punch to the gut. The crown. He had been told it was an object of immense power, capable of giving whoever controlled it unimaginable strength. But now it was clear that there was more to it than he had thought. The Zorethian Empire had guarded it for centuries, and now it was his responsibility to protect it. He had no choice. The crown is— There is no plan, Liam, she replied, her voice as calm as ever, though there was a fire in her eyes. We fight. We hold the line. With those words, the ship's weapon systems powered up, and a brilliant, blinding light flashed across the viewport. Liam didn't flinch. He was ready. The first shots came faster than Liam could react, but his training kicked in instantly. Ilar's words echoed in his mind. Fight with purpose. He closed his eyes for a moment, centering himself, feeling the power within him. His mind connected to the ship's systems, just like he had learned to connect with the energy of the sword. He could feel the vibrations of the blasts, the incoming fire, the ship's defenses coming to life. It was a strange, almost out-of-body experience, as if he wasn't just reacting to the enemy. He was one with the ship, with the weapons, with everything around him. Liam's heart beat faster as he opened his eyes, the world around him slowing down. He moved, his body fluid and fast, almost as though it was guided by something greater than himself. He raised his sword, and the blade hummed with power. The first enemy ship came into view, a sleek, dark vessel, its hull bristling with weapons. He felt the force within him, and with a single fluid motion, he unleashed the power he had been training to control. The sword's blade blazed with energy, slicing through the air as though it were a beam of light. He could feel the blade's connection to him, guiding his hand,